Well, we didn't have a lot of shade in our tropical garden to start with earlier this summer, and our bird of paradise actually needed a little bit of partial shade. So we accommodated that by bending a cattle panel into the form of an arch using some T-posts to stake it at the bottom. And we put a nice selection of vines really over the cattle panel, and they've pretty much taken over during the summer and provided us the shade that we needed as the summer got hotter. And the two vines that I want to share with you some information about today are actually called potato vines, and they are truly a cousin to the potato and the tomato and the tobacco that we're most familiar with. And the one on this side is a green one, and then we've got a variegated one. But the genus species, which is so important in knowing that if you're going to try to grow these, is Solanum jasminoides. And again, if you look closely at the foliage, the green one, it looks like a potato leaf to an extent too. The only difference is it's a little bit shinier and glossier and thicker, so you don't see quite as many insect problems. And then again, the variegated one, which I want to walk over here and show you, is just your typical variegation. The same shape of leaf, it's just a green and yellow, and you'll see this time of year in the fall a little bit of purplish tint to it as well. But these will grow in partial shade, and we've even grown them successfully in full sun. But if you investigate them a little bit closer and you look at the flower and you compare the flower to a potato flower, it really does look very similar. The flower is a whitish color, almost a pinkish color depending on how the light shines on it, but very similar to the potato flower. This one will actually go ahead, and after it flowers, set fruit, and it will turn from a greenish color to almost a purplish black color, and it's just a small fruit, and it's not real showy. It's really grown more for the foliage and the flower. And the thing that I need to point out is that it's definitely not considered edible. And those of you who have grown potatoes notice sometimes during stress periods during the early growing season, sometimes a flower of potato vines will also put fruit on too, and that scares people sometimes. But the way we started these were actually from a container. It was a gallon container, and we just planted the root ball and all in the soil, and they were already staked a little bit, and we just started feeding the vines through the trellis, and before you know it, and actually they've only been in the ground about 4.5 to 5 months and have pretty much taken over this side of the trellis. So again, it's primarily grown as an ornamental. It is not considered edible. And the other thing that you want to keep in mind is it's very sensitive to cold weather. So before the frost temperatures get here, you need to take the cuttings, and we showed you a little bit earlier how to overwinter some of the tropicals. And this one, it's real easy to take cuttings on. You just take a 4 to 6 inch cutting again, you dip it in some rooting hormone, put it in like a 4-inch container, try to keep some humidity on it, and pinch off any fruit or flowers to help put the energy to get those roots to form. And so really a nice one to try in your garden. Now again, this was called potato vine. Another one that I want to share with you is commonly called air potato. And we recently visited with a gentleman in Stillwater, Oklahoma, Mr. Don Hooper. And Mr. Hooper has a great display of the air potato, and its genus species is Dioscorea bulbifera. And he has grown these for several years, and they trellis up a metal porch post there in the front of his house. And that is, what you're seeing is just a complete season's growth. They're just truly covering the front of his porch. And if you look closely at the air potato, it looks more closely related to a sweet potato. The foliage is very similar. The foliage is somewhat of a heart-shaped. The air potato foliage has more distinct veins, and that's really what it's grown for. A little bit thicker, shinier leaf. And if you look even closer, you have to really kind of dissect it to find any small inconspicuous flowers, but it's most commonly grown for this potato-like structure that it puts on the foliage and on the vines. It's, again, looks like a potato. If you cut into it, it has the texture of a potato. It's kind of a warty growth appearance to it, and can get anywhere from a small golf ball size up to baseball even. And those are what Mr. Hooper plants in the ground to continue to grow it year after year. He'll harvest those off, keep them in a cool, dry location, Try to keep them from sprouting on him, and then next spring after the frost has passed, he'll put them in the ground. And he says some of the ones that he digs up from the ground each year are about cantaloupe size even, so they can get pretty big on you. But again, I want to point out that the fruit on this one, when it's raw especially, is poisonous, so you don't want to try to eat it. It's grown strictly for ornamental purposes again. And even if you do try to cook it, it can still cause some digestive problems, so I wouldn't even consider trying to eat it, period, whether it's cooked or not. Just grow it as an ornamental for the nice foliage and the potatoes. And again, it's not really that easy to propagate it by cuttings like it is the potato vine, so you would store the potatoes for your starts next year. Now, if you're interested in trying to grow these, the air potato is one of those that's kind of been passed along by gardener to gardener for many years. The potato vine you can find in the nursery section of some of the garden centers, but usually it's upon special request. And so it's one of those things that just sharing with other gardeners is a big thing to do. Now, of course, they are available in some mail order catalogs too, but if you're interested in these, you'll want to start suggesting to the garden centers to try to carry them for you next year. And again, it's something you may want to consider if you need to add a little bit of height through your garden for next growing season.